Okay, good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to discuss the landscape of the essential patents, the standard essential patents, if it is essential, first of all. However, we'll start with Motorola, then we'll move on to the other aspects of understanding the pooling of resources, particularly from the intellectual property standpoint. And probably I'll be giving you some patent applications. I need to upload those understanding on the website itself, so that will be there on the network, and folks can accordingly do their coding to code the stuff. That is one aspect. Another aspect which is very very important from the LLM point of view is to understand the impact of creating a real data set first, because that is one reason, and that's the only reason the telcos can enhance their network. Because when you're deploying 5G, 6G, 7G, 8 generative technologies, the essence of these technology is the usage of communication network, and particularly this section 3K, or particularly the section 3 of the Indian Patent Act, has literally, it has a lot of meaning, because at the intersection of the law there's something called as section 2, that is the definition section of any of the acts. So when you see the definition section is very open ended, and the good part and the bad part of these acts is a particular word is defined in a different manner in different acts. I have prepared that LLM model, which is proprietary, where it is not for usage for anybody else, because that is part of the DAO. DAO is supposed to be the that is supposed to be an autonomous organization providing justice. So that is already deployed in many parts of the world. I'm part of many DAOs, and also I wish to launch something. I'm not very sure whether the launch would be in India, because the incorporations and everything, I don't want to go through the MCA, because there is another set of data set where in India there's something called as MCA. M stands for ministry, and Ministry of Corporate Affairs, there's something called as the LLPs also, which is supposed to be the limited liability partnership. However, it has been seen, the simple data set is whatever India is portraying in terms of the LLP Act, in terms of there are so many inactive LLPs, but still, if you go to the portal, it says it is active. So the simple point is the deployment of human intervention is not there. And because the deployment of human intervention is not there, so whatever data set is being provided by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, it has to be taken as null and void. And the second thing is LLP is limited liability partnership. The idea of introduction was LP was from a phase, as the way I see it, just to see how people use that and for what services. And the sad part is that it has been misused, and there are a lot of people in the government itself who are misusing that data set to create some kind of blockchain, which is nothing but a coding which is taking different scenarios into picture, stating that, if this happens then this happens. End of the day, these are just scenarios, these are just hypotheses, and these hypothesis itself is creating a lot of menace, because the data set is wrong, the input data is wrong. I mean, LP is supposed to be the partnership between different entities in terms of people. And if the people are not working, why, for whatever reasons, they are active? So the government itself is at fault. And here, MCA is like not, it's a small part of the Indian government. So that data set has to be provided to the WTO, that is the World Trade Organization, and accordingly, things should be processed. That is point number one. Point number two is very, very clear that MCA is misusing the power in all capacity. It is misusing the power of deploying suo moto notices to people, whether it's individuals, whether it's business entities, and that is causing a lot of chaos right now. So this has to be taken into care. And the other part is when LLP Act has to be abolished. If you ask me, what are the 3 or 5 acts I want that should be abolished in my all capacity, the way I understand the working of intellectual property rights, we have to abolish the Indian Patent Act of 1970, because the Indian Patent Act of 1970 came into existence because of the landscape of whatever was happening in 1970. These amendments are nothing but a face off which is not helping out anyone. That is point number one. Point number two, the Indian Trademark Act of 1999, that has to be abolished. Point number three, restructuring of the MCA. Point number four, LLP Act has to be abolished. Point number five, we need to have something which is authoritative enough, because Niti Aayog itself is just using taxpayers' money and organizing events, just having discussion in the air doesn't solve the problem. The Indian government sends its employees for these conferences, particularly at the ITU. I was part of it, and all these government officials, they don't even attend the meetings, they're just there for the photoshop and then they are off to their trips and everything. So the Indian government has to take cognizance of it, and they have to take reporting of from the government people also. At one point we are talking about, try will come up with the regulations and everything, but the first point is, do they understand the regulations at the first place? So those are the pain points, because when I went to try, the person who is in charge, he's busy writing marriage. His daughter was getting married and he was just writing, uh, he was writing cards for sending those, um, whatever the functions are. So the point here is, at any given point of time, all these government officials who are in the communication or in the patenting landscape, they are just promoting their children or the extended relatives to enter this field and create a chaos. So that chaos again cannot come into picture, because blockchain is all about honesty and trust, and here there's so much of mistrust which has been created. And if you see the patenting landscape, particularly during the lockdown, whether it's a trademark or the patenting and the infringement, I mean, oh my god, what have we done to the society in terms of intellectual property right? Infringement is so rampant. I mean, that kind of cases cannot be even filed in the court, because when you are claiming X amount from the government, you have to give that much of court fees. So that is the reason DAOs are in place to help out these kind of organizations. So we'll be touch basing on that. First of all, I'll be discussing about Motorola patents. I'll be talking about Toyota, what has happened before the Delhi High Court, and how companies who have the patents in place, and even if you don't have a patent in place, in terms of you didn't pay the annuity fees or anything, there's something called as trade secret. So just use that arsenal and create that, I would say, the human capacity building, so that your end user should know that whatever they're doing is being infringed. And that is where this new way of functioning is coming into picture, because intellectual property rights, even though the Patent Act came into 1970, it was under the era of Indira Gandhi ji, and it came because to solve the problem of the farmer sector, or to just uh, be a capitalistic country at that point of time. But today, if we see, it is totally different. Now, what is more important is the real estate part. You have to look into the data set of how Delhi was developed under the leadership of Sheila Dikshit ji, and the development which she did during her tenure. I think that is particularly very important data set from the point of view of even thinking what can happen in India. So that is where we are missing the bus, we are missing the train, we are missing the car, we are missing everything, because we are just copying everything. We are talking about Kolhapuri chappals and everything. Now this GI part, this is a very small iota of thing. Based on the GI, you can't say that you are free to infringe upon anything and everything. What is more important is coming up with the acts where we are creating these data pools, because the communication network is the prime thing. If you are using this communication network anywhere in the world, even if you're not doing business in US XYZ country, but still, if you're using this portal to communicate to the other party who's sitting in any part of the world, that is infringement. That doesn't mean that you don't file a trademark in other countries, so you're free to do whatever you wish to. That doesn't happen, because then it is actually infringing upon the tariff aspect. It is infringing upon the articles. I'm not getting into the details, because that is the work of the diplomats. So this has to be taken into care, and because of the silence of the diplomats, particularly the diplomats based out in Bangladesh, whom I know personally, I don't want to take the names. I think that will impact our country in many ways. I don't know how the government is going to resolve it, but we are already seeing the impact in a very big way. The temples are being destroyed in Bangladesh, but what is happening in India? Just imagine if that kind of scenario is enacted in India, what will happen? I mean, we are at a war, not only with the international organizations, but we are at the war in the internal aspect also. But at the same point of time, we have to embrace the unity part. And if in the government, if I say, there are 10,000 ministers, if I'm not getting into data set, because I'm not here to talk about the general politics, but I'm here to embrace the human capacity building, which is very, very important. I'll be talking about it in a while. Let me just fetch out the Motorola patents. Okay, first of all, I will be discussing about the SEPs, or that is basically the standard essential patterns, and so it is supposed to be. So there are two terms which are, I'll just type it down, and we will use the hashtag as the captain. Then we have cert, and we will use cert. Okay, so we are going to look into the SEPs. The general full form is standard essential patterns, and then we have something called as frond, which is supposed to be fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory licensing, which is technology driven. Now, the basis of this understanding is the role of the Indian brain per se, in terms of one has to understand somebody who is actually orchestrating or writing a pattern application. We have to go through a lot of garbage in terms of the data set which is provided is a very hypothetical data set, and the point of contention here is it is just a thought process where it says, in because wherever you're using communication network, it is it is nothing but how different devices would be connected. There has to be something. Okay, this is this is called a handle device in the patenting world. We don't even call it a mobile. So this is a handle device. Anything which you can hold by hand is a handle device. So all the palm tops and everything in terms of the landscape is a handle device. Now this particular, I mean, the screen is locked, is black. I'm not showing the UI right now, but this is basically the UI. UI is the user interface, how the user perceives um, the UI, right? I mean, for the longest time, Nokia in the early days, anywhere from the year 2000 to 2010, launched these mobiles, and very fortunate that I got hand onto anything and everything in terms of the devices which were there in the market, or perhaps before that. I mean, even before Apple was launched, all these Chinese devices were being flooded in India, and that was basically a data set to understand why such devices will have any value also. So at one stage we say that Steve Jobs was responsible to launch Apple and stuff, and blah blah blah. I would say he was a good businessman, because this whole tagline, stay hungry, stay foolish, I mean, people who really understand how intellectual property right work is, this guy particularly was just, before what he did, I'm not getting into it, but I'm talking about the Apple and stuff, not the logo, not anything else, but just the brainchild of what he did in his lifetime. Stay hungry is not to do anything with hunger in terms of achieving something. Stay hungry, stay foolish is just a way how the actor has to act in front of other actors. Here we have to appreciate William Shakespeare, and we have to go back to that time. And I have very fortunate to visit William Shakespeare stuff and everything when I was in London. So I resonate with him a lot, not only from today, but from the essence of what I know about how I know about things. So the point here is stay hungry, stay foolish is being foolish in front of others just to understand their mindset, how they solve a problem. That is what coding is all about. I mean, he never manufactured the devices. It was always um, executed in China. And China, as I said, that country, the people, whether it's Jack Ma, whether it's the government, whatever they are for the people. It's People Republic of China. I have been there, stayed there. I know them very well in terms of the understanding of how they function. They think about the people first, and why they are thinking about the people first, because they have developed that infra in terms of, I mean, United Kingdom is just replicated there. I have been to that place. I was mesmerized to see that kind of infra being developed. There's a lot of data which I haven't shared in terms of the photographs, the videos, and everything, because I have been a patent drafter. I have orchestrated so many applications for the Fortune top companies. I mean, not even 100. I mean, the companies who are actually the operators of the world in controlling how the economy has to work. And the good part was when these applications came to me, I had the freedom to, just do whatever I wanted to in terms of drafting those applications or orchestrating the framework of those pattern applications. So that only, that doesn't come in the SEPs or the FRAND. What is important here is, if the understanding has to be there, although India is starting to get into that landscape of, we will manufacture XYZ, but let me tell you, there are so many loopholes when you wish to manufacture it on a scale, because even angular difference of whatever the angular difference is, it is going to make a lot of impact, and that impact becomes very big when you're deploying those technologies on a big scale for the big devices or apparatus or machines, because that's the framework of how a patent is supposed to be written at the first place. Now the conflict is arising right now, whether the patent is existing or not, is the royalty part or the licensing part. Now again, there's so many books written around it, I don't need to get into it, because those books were written by people who wanted to control that. So internet cannot per se be controlled, but what should be controlled is the right usage of internet. The communication network cannot be misused, and all the protocols of I2 has to be deployed. WIPO is a part of United Nations, that is World Intellectual Property Organization, headquartered in Geneva. In a similar fashion, we have ITU, which is International Telecommunication Union, which is handling the communication network on a global scale. And there are so many folks who come to me like, why don't you train us? And I tell them, just go and do the courses of ITU. That is more important, because my understanding of communication network is on another level, and it's another level playing field to be understood, not by the masses but by the framework people who already know about what we have been doing over the years. Because with the IP address itself, and with other resources where the surveillance is being done not only in the online world but in the offline world also. So do you think people are not being surveilled? Like, there's vigilance committee, everything is being done, and they know exactly what kind of primordial soup everybody is into. And particularly people like us, who have been working in different capacity with the government, with the international authorities. Very fortunate that I have worked both with the Congress and the BJP. But again, the point of contention here is, one person cannot change the way the country has to work. But in the society itself, the government people itself, they don't want to work. They are here to pull the other people down, and that is not going to take the country forward. We are after the private enterprises and saying that, okay, today you have to give us this fees, that fees. Why we have to pay fees where when the government people are not doing anything? Why they are using taxpayers money just to travel and do nothing? You go to the government offices, in 99.9% cases you won't be able to meet the person who is responsible to take the, or pass that order, where the signature becomes important. Why that kind of authority is given to these government officials is the question the international authorities are trying to answer. And when these people come on the big stage, they're talking in air. I mean, talking in air is the easiest thing to do we want our country to progress, is the question we need to answer. So much damage has been done in terms of intellectual property rights, because that is the prime stuff I have been doing all over the years. And all these patent agents, how these patent agents became patent agent, that's the biggest question. I mean, 99.9% people should not be patent agents right now, but still we are patent agents. If we are patent agents, we should benefit the first officer, whatever stuff is there. But what is happening is, we are identifying individuals and putting them into a bracket where we are saying that these are the pattern agents, and then we are targeting these pattern agents. So this is wrong. In 1.4 billion people, either these people should be protected, or the other part is abolish the Indian pattern agents and give them job in the government, because they're intelligent enough to be better human beings as compared to the 1.4 billion people. So that has to be taken care right now, which is very, very important. And the other things, I'll be doing the smart contracts and deploying everything, but it's very clear that the patenting landscape and what has happened with the Toyota at the Delhi High Court. I mean, from the outside point of view of an expert who has been working in intellectual property rights, the easiest way is the sensitization part. I mean, rather than going through the court process, just issue a public notice, and this has to be done by the company. You don't need to hire lawyers and everything. The Toyota company has to launch a public notice and let people decide whether they want to use that product or not, because evergreening is not possible in the patenting landscape. But at the same point of time, trade secrets, know-how, technical know-how will always remain. We never disclose the best mode of operandi in terms of a patent application. Even the data sets and everything, those affidavits has no value, because trade secret is always a trade secret. And because of that, companies like Coca-Cola, KFCs are surviving. And real estate itself has to be um, taken into consideration in a way where IP law has to be embraced. It cannot be misused. And we are going to see that kind of tariff in terms of what happens between US and USPTO, because USPTO, they are fed up. I mean, for the longest time, I have been receiving emails. They have been trying to tell me why Pretty is not, handling these contentious and non-contentious matter. I've been to court. I've seen the court. I don't want to be there. That's my simple answer. I mean, I'm part of the ecosystem, but I'm like happy to, just stop working with these organizations, because the kind of people who are really working in this organization, where intellectual property rights has to be embraced, it is being devalued. Otherwise, it's very easy to take any kind of application and start launching your own stuff, because just a particular tweet doesn't talk about the Indian patent landscape. There has to be no escape of intellectual property rights. We are seeing, because see, the judges, they know it, but until and unless the parties and the others and the whole ecosystem is not conducive, people like us will never go to court to solve that problem. And that is where these arbitration clauses and everything comes into picture. But when there's a third party and there's no kind of contract between them, the easiest way is to come with a caution notice, launch it, do the human sensitization, and let the public decide. That is the easiest way out. As for the judges are concerned, the Delhi High Court, at least few of the judges are very good. The kind of infringement in terms of whatever money or money laundering which is happening with the judges is very evident, because the cases have been reported. And it's not that justice has to be served. This is how the country has been working since the independent India. Even in time of Indira Gandhi, when she was before the High Court, there has been a lot of screw up which is happening. But the intent is very clear. If you understand how Sri Lanka works, how everything is scriptured in Sri Lanka, that is one reason Sri Lanka is not very pro patenting. But at the same point of time, anything which is mechanical, anything which has some kind of value is being utilized and filed as a patent application in different countries, and Sri Lanka is silent on that. So the point I'm trying to make here is the idea of patenting doesn't even exist when you understand intellectual property rights, because that kind of knowledge was already there in our scriptures, whether it was India, Sri Lanka, whether it's China. And if you just see the at some point of time in the historical data set, the land which is like India, Sri Lanka, China, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and all the Asian countries was one particular land. It is just because of the shift in the core of the earth, these shifting happened. And that's why we have those floating, stones and everything, the bridges and everything. But what is important right now is China has surpassed everyone. I mean, in terms of quality, in terms of execution, in terms of hard work. They are smart, they work very hard, and that is one reason uh, US will work with China in very close collaboration, because China is already very well collaborated not only with Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, the small islands. So there is a lot of MOUs between those countries. However, as the Indian MOU is concerned, we are still at the very nascent stage. But what we have done in last, I mean, since the lockdown, which is 2020 till 2025, we have to pay a price for that. I don't know what price that would be, but this is how the current landscape is all about. And the onus always was on the diplomats to see that the relationships are maintained. But what happened in Bangladesh will impact India, because Bangladesh and India not only has a lot of collaborations, but Bangladesh sends a lot of patients in terms of the medical tourism. The Indian medical tourism, a lot chunk of money is coming from Bangladesh, and we all know that in terms of the people who are there in the government. And this is being very impactful right now, and that kind of impact would be seen in the country at the WTO, which is the World Trade Organization, because what is happening right now should not happen as far the international politics should be understood in a way it has to be understood. Thank you for watching out the video. I believe this is of some data set in terms of the compilation of what I thought is important today. But intellectual property rights is being misused top to bottom. There's no third way of doing it, and particularly the MCA, which is Ministry of Corporate Affairs, whether it's the private limited LLP Act, should be abolished, and all the LLPs should be closed, or otherwise they have to be converted into private limited, so that they are scrutinized properly. And the LP which are active, if they are not active per se, they are not active. I mean, the government employees have to be questioned. I mean, that's how the reality is, and this is the sad reality of India. Thank you for watching out the video. Have a great day ahead.